Thank you, Your Worship. There's no proposed amendments to the agenda at this time.
Thank you. Can you get a motion to accept or motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Hendricks.
So moved, Your Worship.
All in favor? Or sorry, discussion on, no. All in favor? That carries unanimously. All right, so on the consent agenda this evening, we have 3 items. I move that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate: the meeting minutes of, or item 5A, the regular council meeting minutes of November the 13th, 2018. Item 5B, the special council meeting November 13, 2018. And the minutes of item 5C, committee of the whole, November 20th. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to exempt from that motion item 5C.
Okay.
Committee of the Whole.
So moved. Any further discussion on the motion?
What 12A?
All right, hearing none. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Which brings us to item, item 4, open forum. Is there anybody registered to speak tonight, Ms. Winter?
Thank you, Your Worship. We did not receive any registrations for this evening's open forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Which brings us to item 5C, committee of the whole minutes. Councillor Barnhart, you removed them.
Thank you, Your Worship. As chair of the Committee of the Whole, I noticed that there was one correction that I'd like to see made, and that was at one point Councillor Hendricks needed to recuse himself from the meeting, and I didn't see that recorded in the minutes. So I would like to make sure that we have that adjusted.
Okay. Are you prepared to move the minutes as amended?
I would.
Fair enough. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. Whoop. No, seeing none. All in favor? Ouch. That carries. There are no public hearings this evening. Tonight we have one registered presentation on our agenda, item 7A, from the Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival. I'd like to invite Mr. Jeremy Cornell and his team to come make a presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, members of council and Mayor Stewart, for having me here. It's always a pleasure to make my annual visit to council chambers and give you an update on the BBRF. I want to thank Mayor Stewart for attending our festival this year and providing the welcome message on behalf of the town. It was much appreciated. And I want to thank Councillor Barnhart for her ongoing volunteerism at our festival as well. And we look forward to seeing the rest of you at the 2019 festival, so you can see firsthand the value of this event and our partnership at work. Does this thing do anything?
It should click through, but
I have to back up the clock. Technical errors.
it's okay. If you run over a little bit,
Hey,
we'll grant you some grace.
Somebody else click the button for me? Perfect. Since some of you are new to this event, I will provide a very brief history. This started as a grassroots community event as part of the promotions committee in 2008. As the event grew larger, and it was larger than the mandate of the promotions committee, and in order to be in control of our own budget, the town admin pushed for us to become an independent not-for-profit society. This was something we took a long time to consider, as we were essentially removing the safety net of being an official town event. But in 2012, we formed an incorporated not-for-profit society, and we have managed independently under that since, with an ongoing partnership agreement with the town of Beaumont. In 2013, we relocated from the county at the Badass Fairgrounds into Four Seasons Park to put Beaumont back into the Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival. This is when we also changed from September to the summer solstice weekend in June for our event. Historically, the Town and Country Days was held the second week of June on Farmers' Day, but in 2016, the town moved Town and Country Days to be the same weekend as the BBRF, and that's how that came to be for the last few years. Currently, we have started the process of becoming a registered charitable organization so that we can issue tax receipts and donations and further our efforts of nonprofit in the town of Beaumont. Next slide. As volunteers who put in literally 500 plus hours per year into this event, we're often asked why we do it. The answer to that is that we're passionate about not only this event, but arts and culture and our town as a whole. We're stewards of the Beaumont Blues and Roots Festival, and we're working to see it outlast all of us. It's been said that throughout history, business and commerce come and go, but it's the arts and culture of a society that stand the test of time, which is evident by visiting any museum. It's through events such as this that we are creating a legacy not for us, but for the community as a whole. Next slide, please. So this is some of the impact here. We have outlived a number of other festivals and events in surrounding communities, which is a testament to our community and the support we have received. We remain 100% volunteer, which is unique among festivals of this size and nature. In the past 11 years, we have had over 1,000 volunteer shifts, hundreds of volunteers, and over 60,000 volunteer hours on the BBRF. Estimated economic impact of this festival to our community is over $5 million, which is conservatively based on proven formulas on what people spend at our event, as well as in the community when they visit for a multi-day event such as ours. We continue to garner local and national media coverage, which reflects positively on both the BBRF and the town as a whole, and we're proud to have had a part in putting Beaumont on the map nationally. We continue to support other not-for-profit volunteer-based organizations through fundraising opportunities, running bar services at their events, and providing volunteer opportunities for them. Next. This is the foundation diagram here. This kind of shows the pillars of support that we rely on to make this festival happen every year. So community, which includes both our local community in Beaumont as well as the music community in the greater Edmonton capital region, which we depend on greatly. Volunteers, as mentioned, this event depends heavily on a large volunteer workforce, and we're proud to have volunteers who return year after year, some from as far away as Calgary and British Columbia. Partnerships. We continue to grow and foster new relationships with local business and with businesses who are starting to recognize the huge benefit that this event has for our local economy. And the final pillar is you, the town of Beaumont and as a whole. This started as a town event, and we continue to foster that partnership with the town to ensure that we're representing positively the town and all of its amazing assets. Next. How does your support help us? So this is kind of where does the money go and why we need it and why we depend on it. So as the majority of our revenue, you'll see later, comes from ticket sales, and we can't sell tickets without having some of our acts booked. The town funding provides the base, which helps us to get acts booked early in the year and kick off our ticketing and revenue generation each year. Having the support of our partnership, including the town, allows us to make this an affordable event for families and people of all walks of life. This partnership connects us to the town as it was previously connected through the promotions committee, making this an event that extends beyond our small group and is truly an inclusive event that markets the town of Beaumont as a whole. Next, please. But we do face a number of risks and challenges which we have to mitigate and manage, one of which is weather. In 2012, when we were still holding the event in September, we had a bad weather weekend and had to cancel a number of performances. And then in 2014, we didn't have to cancel any performances, but we did have an overall rain situation which impacted our walk-up sales greatly. So those are two of the major incidences, but generally we've had pretty good since moving to June. Ticket sales. So one of the issues we continuously face is booking the acts that are going to draw people and make them want to spend their money on tickets for our event. The past 2 years we've had great success. We've increased our advanced ticket sales, and we've limited the number of walk-ups, and we've built on the security of having tickets sold before the event. Timing is critical. The top acts can't be booked last minute as they plan tours up to a year in advance, which is why the ongoing funding is so important for our event. Ticket sales, as I mentioned, we'll talk about it a bit more later, but that is the basis for most of our revenue generation. And as Councillor Daniluk and I can attest to, even having 3 extra people can make a big difference. Organizational reputation, I mentioned. We are very proud to have built a well-recognized and respected reputation in the festival community industry. We consider ourselves ambassadors not only for this event, but for the town as a whole. And it's very important to us that our volunteers, our artists, and our patrons have an experience that is positive and memorable. Next. So our budget is based on historical data and expected revenue. Most major acts provide us with a draw information for the various communities to show us what they typically can draw for ticket sales and what to expect. And that helps us in conjunction with managing based on our own experiences. We work closely with and have good relationships with leaders of other local festivals, including the Edmonton Folk Fest and the Edmonton Rock Fest. In 2018, we based our budget on expected ticket sales of $2,500 per day Friday and Saturday and $1,500 for Sunday. That was our budget basis. We increased our promotion and marketing for 2018 and put an emphasis on the local area and capital region. In the end, while our advanced ticket sales for prior years actually ended up higher, we had really good advanced ticket sales. Our overall attendance averaged out really good over the 2 days, but it was lower than budgeted, resulting in a revenue deficit of about $59,000 based on what we budgeted versus what we actually had for ticketing revenue. But that's not all bad news. Our partnerships and sponsorships were up $18,000 over the prior year. Volunteerism was up about 10%, and our community engagement was up, and we worked with many more local suppliers and businesses, and we've injected directly $70,000 back into local businesses. That's money that came out of our bank into local businesses directly. Next slide, please. So these are preliminary numbers. We're still working on our year-end reports as required by the government. It's important, I think, this scale is, what's important to note on this, I believe, is the overall scale of the event. There's a common misconception that the BBRF is a $50,000 event because that's what the town provides, but in fact, we're managing a $300,000 budget and all of the risks and challenges associated with that. So from here I have just some rough budget versus actual numbers. You can see the revenue was down, as I mentioned. That was primarily based on ticket sales. Other revenues were up, and expenses were slightly higher than budgeted, but that included paying down $30,000 that we had held on to as debt from that incident in 2014. So we netted negative $32,000. If you don't include that 2014 mishap, then we were pretty close to breaking even. But that negative we've already begun paying down through additional fundraising and revenue generation, and we have plans to get back on track as we always do. Next slide, please. We managed to, so these are some of the achievements from last year. We managed to finish paying down that debt that had lingered since 2014 when we had those weather issues. We partnered with many new local businesses, including a major 3-year main stage sponsorship agreement with Dream Developments, which we're very excited about. We worked with and supported many local businesses. We had a real strong focus on shopping local as much as possible. For anything we could buy locally, we worked with the vendors to do so. And we kicked off our For a Girl campaign, becoming one of the first major festivals in Canada to mandate 50% female acts. Thank you, Leroy. Next slide, please. So we're a not-for-profit volunteer-based organization, as mentioned. We're working hard to consistently balance our budgets and build a reserve for the future. And there are some key missions and values that we'll get to those handouts in a minute, but supporting the community, engaging youth, providing positive cultural experiences, and showcasing Beaumont as a whole. Next slide, please. As a committee, as I mentioned, we face these challenges every year, but we consider 2018 festival to be our biggest success to date. We had a huge positive response from our visitors, an incredible amount of social media posts, letters, phone calls, emails, and positive support from this event. Some of that information is what Leroy has handed out that you can read at your leisure. It's some good news stories for the town as a whole, I think, to see this kind of feedback coming. And we had continued growth with a strong local focus. Even though our ticketing was less than we had budgeted for, we had a consistent turnout for both Friday and Saturday of the festival, which was excellent to see. Next slide, please. So 2019, BBRF 2019 is going to take place on June 21st and 22nd. This continues with our initial change to be close to the summer solstice weekend. This does put us 1 week after Town and Country Days for 2019, and we're excited to see if that has a positive impact, as many people have told us that there's too much that weekend in order to see it all, so we're looking forward to seeing how that affects things. We've done some evaluation of our numbers and over the past 5 years and determined that the Sunday programming is not sustainable or supported by our attendees. With work and school on Monday, the attendance is always low and dwindles throughout the day. So we have eliminated Sunday. But with a modified schedule for Friday and Saturday, we're still able to provide 80% of the number of acts, still offering incredible value for the dollar, and we will maintain our ticket pricing, which is in alignment with other two-day music festivals in the area. The 2019 budget is developed based on the actual results of 2,000 people per day for Friday and Saturday, and we're going to hang on to that stretch goal of hitting that 2,500 because that's where we want to be. We're working on many new exciting partnerships which will help eliminate some of the risks as previously mentioned, and we continue to support and grow our involvement in the community. What we would love to see from the town and to get more involved is perhaps instead of simply taking tickets in response to our partnership agreement, we would love to see the town have a presence at the festival. We would love to see you have some sort of a tent and a table and your economic development team on site to, engage with these thousands of visitors that we're bringing to town. So year after year, we've done a great job of bringing people to town, and now we believe it's your job to give them a reason to come back. So, and final slide is just to thank you on behalf of our committee, which is Karina, Brent, Roxanne, Marcia, Maggie, Gwen, Bill, and Leroy. I want to offer our sincere appreciation and gratitude for the ongoing support, not just financial, but in all the ways that the town supports this event, and we are very grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight. It's a great event, and an especially big thank you because it is volunteer run, and that makes it all the more special to Beaumont because it just is. Like, volunteers make the world go around. So yeah, thank you very much for putting the event on. It's a signature event. I look forward to many, many, many more years of it in Beaumont, and we'll definitely take that last recommendation under advisement. Are there any comments or questions from members of council? Councillor Hendricks.
Bishop, again, thank you for the presentation and a question. Certainly the date that is being held this upcoming year as compared to others has been an interesting piece of science, I think. I think we've moved it around now 3 or 4 times in terms of different dates. We've looked at the historical averages for rain as to which weekends are better than others. We've looked at what it takes to synergize different events to draw in more people to potentially have an overflow into your program. Then we had staffing issues that were discussed as to whether or not it works better on one weekend or multiple weekends. So to that question, have we addressed that with our admin to see if that fits with their thinking in terms of splitting up the 2 events back to back?
Our date was set based on, historically, we always try to be around that weekend, the 20th, the summer solstice, and so we learned of Town and Country Days being the prior weekend. It's just the way it worked out for next year because there's 5 weekends in June rather than 4, and so we haven't had any in-depth discussions about it yet to this point in time, so no.
So it hasn't been before our administration relative to staffing levels for 2 weekends as compared to a single weekend for both events?
It has not.
Okay.
And our staffing requirements, there's some resources and some equipment that the town provides, but
right.
Most of that is delivered during workday weekdays. So the actual weekend, we don't have a huge need for a huge demand anyway.
So as you know, I sit on the promotions committee, and certainly we've had a lot of conversation about how to drive both events up in terms of attendance. So hence the question. So thank you.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Bishop. Through you to the presenter. Excuse me. You alluded to an economic impact of $5 million, and I think you then also mentioned a formula for calculating this. Could you just talk me through how that's actually calculated?
Well, I don't have the information all with me. That was part of my presentation either last year or the year before. We had an in-depth discussion on that with either this council or the previous one. But basically, we can look back at the numbers spent for what is spent on tickets and what is spent at the actual festival, and that accounts for about half of that. So there's about $2.5 million that has actually been spent over the 11 years at the festival. That's through food trucks and different businesses, plus the money that we spend in town, plus just an estimate based on, we actually had worked with the prior administration about 3 years ago with the previous economic development fellow, and just looked at studies that were done at various universities about what people spend when they visit a town on a 2-day events and 1-day events and 3-day events, and that's sort of, okay, there was some data that came up with ranges of $150 to $400, and we just took with the low end of that, of people are spending $150 if they're here for a couple of days on food and gas and whatever else they spend it on, and that's kind of the calculation based on the number of visitors we've had. So.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to get a feel for, if I was ever asked that question, how I would do that. Can I ask a second question?
Sure, go ahead.
The ticket shortfall that you alluded to, how do you account for that? What was the cause of that?
I think we are involved in a number of events, and like I mentioned, we work closely with other events such as the Edmonton Folk Fest, Terry Wickham and Todd at the Edmonton Rock Fest, as well as the Edmonton Blues Fest. These are all people in my inner circle that I communicate with on a regular basis and we work with. And in general, the consensus is that, and it's hard to pinpoint, but the general economy in our province is having a huge impact on events such as these. All of those events saw reduced ticket sales in 2018 as well. It's the unfortunate side effect of 3 or 4 years of this recession or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's having an impact, and that's why this year we've kind of lowered our budget expectations to be in alignment with what we've actually seen last year and in previous years. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Montgomery. Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for coming in. I would just concur from the Mayor's comments about the signature event and the significance to Beaumont. I'm really excited to see it on a different weekend. Not only myself, but just hearing from others, pretty exhausted by the time you've got these kids running around and you don't have the energy to go and party it up there. So looking forward to seeing that. You mentioned your mission about supporting and promoting Beaumont, and I really appreciated your comments there. I'd like to pull on that a little bit more. My personal opinion is that it felt very transactional. Here's 50,000, and there wasn't that partnership that you alluded to. So I'd like to see a lot more involvement, not only during the event where the mayor gets up and says his thing, but all the promotional stuff that goes with it. You're going out and promoting out different radio stations, television stations. Bring the mayor along, bring our economic development people along that we can jointly promote the community, and that's where I think we get that true partnership building in. So I'd like you to consider that. With regards to the timing of this presentation, you said it's an annual one. Again, I'd like you to give some consideration to coming in prior to our budget workshop. You'll note that we have put this in as an operational line item going forward. But I think for us, I'll speak for myself, certainly good to get an idea of the numbers and where you're going, and there could be potential for change to that number if needed, right? And so in order for us to be able to make that decision prior to budget, I know you've got to get it lined up and there's a lot of work to pull the numbers together, but that would be something that I would be looking for. So your comments, your thoughts on more around the promotional, the partnership with Beaumont, is that something that you think you could consider?
Yeah, so first of all, was to speak to the timing, absolutely. I have no problem presenting this kind of a report earlier in the year, and it totally makes sense to me why that, and I watched the budget discussions and heard your conversations around that, so totally makes sense. As it's written right now in our partnership agreement, we have to do it before January 1st, so historically it's always happened in November. It's just how it's been, but yeah, I'm fine to come whenever you want me.
Thank you.
And yeah, we are totally, as I mentioned, we are open, and the Blues Fest is open for business, the town is open for business, and we're happy to do what we can. We want to work with the town, with the city of Beaumont next year, and not, we're not an island. We do this, we started as a means to promote the town, and that's always continued. Like,
Yep.
we want to see some better engagement, and like I mentioned, our partnership agreement calls for a certain number of tickets to be provided, and we give those out to admin, and they distribute them however they distribute them, and that's the last we hear of it. But we would love to see you have a presence at the actual event and have people there. We have a lot of local businesses that are doing that and promoting themselves to these people, and it would only make sense that the town be there as well.
Yeah, sorry, just a follow-up. You mentioned, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention it or not, but you said it again. So on the ticketing, personally, and I think a few others, if not everyone, a bit uncomfortable getting those tickets, and I appreciate that's administration passing them through us. I prefer not to, spend my own money to go. So I appreciate that's not you. That's our admin can look at that. So just a heads up that I think we should be providing our own money to go and see that. So I know our council had a quick chat about that and didn't use them for that reason. So certainly appreciate the partnership there and looking forward to seeing what you guys can deliver.
Just so you're aware, there's actually 50 weekend passes included in the partnership agreement, which at $129 a piece, you can do the math. So that's what the expectation is currently. So we feel that's a little bit excessive too, but
Okay, so
that's something we can negotiate with administration.
and we won't get into it here.
No,
We're not going to renegotiate the deal tonight.
No.
but
no.
We definitely need to take a look at it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to be transparent.
No. So just to clarify, 50 the agreement, and I should know this, but 50 passes that go to administration.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two quick questions, but a personal note. First of all, you mentioned the number 3, Jeremy, and, as it worked out, if I lost by 3 votes, I could not imagine losing to a nicer guy than you, so you have my respect in that area.
Likewise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Two quick questions, if you don't
Having a
mind.
lot of
So the town contribution of $50,000 based on the year's 2018 results, obviously it's a very crucial part of your budget, and we understand that. Helps to clarify where it's coming from. But a quick idea, if you could, my first question is, can you explain how the $50,000 is used by the Beaumont Roots Festival? Is it used primarily to book the events, the talent, or is it into the operating budget as a lump sum and you divvy it up as you need to? Give us an idea how it's actually used.
It's part of our operating budget of the $300,000 that we budget for this whole event. Primarily due to the timing of it, because that's one of the first large contributions that we get in the bank early in the year, then it ends up primarily going to deposits on equipment and supplies and bands, because a lot of these things like our stage and our production and the bands, primarily the main acts, the headline acts, need to have deposits in order to sign contracts. So that's where a large bulk of that ends up going every year. And then
Perfect.
as we get those bands booked, then we start generating revenue, and our ticket revenue comes in on a monthly basis once we start selling tickets. So.
Okay, perfect. Second follow-up question is, so with your departure from Sunday activities, I applaud you making that decision. It's probably a hard one to make, to pull back on an event, and it's a good fiscal responsibility question, and good for you guys for making that. The question I have is, do you anticipate your expenses going down by approximately 20%? You mentioned 80% of the acts will be looked after on Friday and Saturday, so you expect your expenditures to go down, so the town's contribution should be much more positive to your end of bottom line. There's a good chance you'll break even in the coming year with having less expenditures on the Sunday. Is that what your anticipation would be, or?
Yeah, well, our anticipation is that our costs will go down. Of course, we'll have less acts, and then a lot of our rental equipment, we rent everything, fences and power and the stage and all of these things. So we'll hopefully see some savings there by eliminating a day of rentals and getting things cleaned up a day earlier. So good. We're still, in the quoting process and getting bids on all of that items, so we don't have final numbers on anything yet, but that is the anticipation, yes, is to
Thank you.
Lower the costs.
Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. Great. It was a very successful event again, and it's in no short order. It's all the work that I know the volunteers are putting into it, and especially yourself. One of the questions I have about how we could help in terms of the town and others might be around the parking. I wonder if you could comment a bit on what are you looking at, or what could be done to help with parking for this event?
Parking is always a challenge, so we've worked in the past few years since we moved into town. We work with the schools primarily, with the high school, with Dancero Meadows, and with the, well, we have been utilizing the Aquafit Center, which is going to be a challenge next year as well, so. But yeah, primarily the schools, and then we run buses around to them, so it's been semi-successful. No Frills as well has been very accommodating with parking as well, so. It's one of those things that's always a challenge, but we have managed to manage it for a number of years, and we haven't had any incidences or any complaints from people about street parking, so we're pretty happy about that, because that's always a concern. That
You always want to make it the best it can be, and that's
Yeah.
probably the one fly in the ointment there, but it's not, it's definitely not keeping people away, so.
Yes, you can build a
Appreciate that.
parking lot somewhere in the next 6 months. That would be
Or the
great.
shuttles, or maybe we can help people.
Have I mentioned a tight budget?
Thank you.
Councillor Van Ukert, final comments and questions.
Yeah, but thank you, through your worship, to the presenter. Thanks for coming in, and I echo a couple of the sentiments of Councillor Monkoff-Swain around the timing, and thanks for adjusting, being able to adjust that. Just some clarity around festivals such as the Blues and Roots Festival, breaking even versus being in a position to turn a profit. I know anecdotally I've heard some conversation around, shouldn't this festival be as big as it is, make money? Would you comment on that a little bit? I know that personally you and I have had a little conversation around it, and you know what the history is for other events in the region, and just maybe share some of that. How that goes. It's good to break even, right?
Well, certainly it's good to break even, and we would love to. Our goal is to be in a position where we've worked over the last 11 years to build up from our first year where we had a couple hundred people to having a couple thousand people, and now our goal is to maintain that consistency of getting those couple thousand people, ideally 2,500 a day is what our stretch goal is, and maintaining that consistently, and from there building up a bit of a reserve to help with the rainy day and that kind of thing. So that is kind of our long-term goal. And we're working hard to build additional partnerships and additional sponsors. I mentioned the Dream Developments. That was a big win for us, and we're very excited about the coming years, because that's a multi-year deal with them, and it grows each year. So, but we're working on more of those kind of opportunities with local businesses, and just trying to build up to a point where it's not, living paycheck to paycheck, so to speak, on a festival level. So,
And traditionally, like other festivals around, like maybe share some perspective on that. Like how do they operate? And
well, a lot of them have the same challenges, and a lot of them are funded in a similar fashion. Like the Edmonton Folk Fest is a way larger scale event than ours, and for 35 years they've depended on the City of Edmonton to be one of their major cash sponsors, as well as facilities and other items similar to us, and we've worked closely with them since day one, so they've kind of been our role model, our big brother, to how we structure our event and our budgets and our fundraising and everything. So that's kind of the example that we look to is them.
yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I think it's important for everybody to hear that and understand that, right?
Yeah.
The synergies. One just final question. Do you anticipate any other asks besides we've put some dollars aside, the 50,000 aside. There's, as Councillor Hendricks alluded, there's some support from administration to help get organized with some of the, I don't know, tables or garbage cans, whatever you guys get support. Do you anticipate any other asks beyond that at all for this year?
No, it's been pretty consistent. It's pretty much a well-oiled machine for the last 4 or 5 years, and the town has been super accommodating with the use of Four Seasons Park to start with. It's a great facility, and then there's those items like barricades and garbage cans and a few things that we borrow and utilize from the towns, and they've been super accommodating, and I anticipate there'll be less of a demand on those items if we're not on the same weekend as Town and Country Days, so it should be just a matter of working out the details.
Perfect, yeah. And I would support the conversation around the town increasing presence there with the table and a tent and stuff like that too. So I think that's something we can talk about, and that's a fair ask, so thank you very much.
Yep.
Once again, final thanks. Appreciate you coming in, and appreciate you and your team putting on this event in our town. Good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, brings us to the first of our business. business items this evening. The Fire Service Excellence Review. I'd like to invite Chief Cook to the front. Is it working?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, it's truly a pleasure to be here with you again this evening. With me tonight is Daryl Colley, who I have the pleasure of introducing, who is the owner of Emergency Management Training, which, as you may remember from the kickoff meeting back in January of this year, is the company that was selected of many proponents to conduct the fire service review for the town of Beaumont. Daryl's going to be presenting tonight a high-level review of the service review, and over the course of the next months, administration will be working through the review and identifying priorities and tasks to bring back to council for consideration in the future. Having said that, my notes are done. I'd like to introduce Daryl Colley to take us through the presentation.
Your Worship and Council, thank you for this opportunity. On behalf of Chief Lal Kwan, Chief Les Karpluk, and myself, we feel very honored to have this opportunity to work with Chief Cook and the fire department. First of all, let me say it's a fire service excellence review, and it really did demonstrate a high level of excellence with the fire service here in Beaumont. The review had a number of focuses, looking at the existing service, currently the fire service that you're providing based on the risk, the type of building structures you have in town, trends and forecasts, obviously with the town being growing into a city and growing as quickly as it is. This is a long-term report. It's not a report to address this year or next year, but to look at the next 10 years coming. We took a look at the station, compliance standards, training, your emergency management program, bylaws, the equipment, your fire prevention program, etc. So what we wanted to look at was what's going really well. Are there any gaps? If there are gaps, and where can we improve and go moving forward? We also took a look at, again, the future and how the town or the city should be to growing with the growth in population and its expansion. So we took a look at all aspects of the fire service, everything from the community risk assessment all the way through to mutual aid programs, as well as the current operations and the capital. There's a number of standards that we used both provincially, nationally, and we looked at some international standards as well, and standards that are used commonly throughout fire service across both Alberta and Canada. We always like to go back to the three lines of defense. The best fire is the fire that doesn't occur. And that starts with public fire safety education. Educating people on how to be fire safe, as well as what to do if there actually is a fire. And that includes early detection, things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, educating children in being fire safe, etc. Should educational programs fail, then the next step is enforcement of bylaws and building codes and that sort of thing to ensure a safe community. If those two components fail, the next component is your emergency response capabilities. So we always like to look at the very beginning, by trying to minimize our demand on the emergency response capabilities. It'll always be there, but through the prevention and the 3 lines of defense. With fire, time is of the essence. Fire in modern construction grows much more rapidly than it does in homes that were built 50 or 60 years ago. Everything from trusses are now being glued together. We're finding that the whole combustible environment, the envelope, the building itself, is more combustible, as well as the furnishings in buildings, in your homes. Everything now is synthetic, high degree of flammability, as well as toxicity when it does catch fire. So early detection, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, early notification of the fire service, so 911, alarm systems, quick dispatch, and then the response to the fire. So the assembly time of the firefighters. So we looked at, for example, Monday to Friday, you have a full-time complement on staff, and then after hours, your response to the fire as well. That's detailed. We looked at a lot of statistics in the report. Firefighters need, once they arrive scene, to be able to set up and then to get into an attack mode of the fire. So that's all part of the response capabilities we look at. So it encompasses where your station is, or as the municipality grows and population grows, whether you have multiple stations, your staffing, both the career and volunteer, and your dispatch processes. So using that data, we took a look at what some of the needs in the community are and where some of those gaps are in the future as the town continues to grow. We looked at the current facilities that you have, as well as the apparatus and their capabilities of meeting the town, and certainly they meet the current demands quite well, but as the municipality grows over the next 10 years. We made 16 recommendations, which is actually very good. Some of our reports, typically they run 30. Some fire services will run many more. 16 recommendations, and again, those are not necessarily gaps. Those are how do we address the growth that we're going to see over the next 10 years. So we looked at an increased focus, everything from an increased focus on fire prevention initiatives to expanding the current station facilities, and potential opportunities to partner with the county in the short term. We also took a look at, as the city, they will be a city, as it grows and your population, forecast of 44,000, as it starts to grow, taking a look at the potential of another station in the long term. So these recommendations are found within the report. They're also broken down by timeline, short-term, mid-term, and long-term, as well as some financial implications of the different recommendations. So our overall assessment is that the fire service has been well supported by council. You have a great fire service, well-trained staff, very dedicated staff, and you've invested well into your fire service. With growth, though, will require continued investment. There's always room for opportunity, but again, as I've said a couple times now, both your volunteers as well as your crew staff, the chief, really have made up an excellent fire service for your community, and we look forward to seeing it grow as your community grows. Your Worship.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I did read the report in its entirety very thoroughly. It made note of a lot of the things you said, and it was really well done. I found it's going to give council a lot of, and the fire service and the chief, a lot of things to think about as we move forward, because there's some heavily funded items there that, did I mention the budget's tight? But yes, I hope, but it's an emergency response service, and we need to keep it in shape and keep going, so that's great. But so getting into it, are there any questions for the presenter? Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, thank you, and thank you to the presenter and to our chief. Just a comment, when we had our first setup meeting, I brought in some history, how the lands were acquired for the fire hall by the council of the day, and with the lands being acquired from TELUS, AGT at the time. Part of the agreement was the building that was on site, which is where the switchgear is currently today, that building would become the ownership of that building would become part of Beaumont at some point, and that in fact we designed the fire hall so that becomes the sort of the fire chief's office, so to speak, once all the technology was pulled out of there. And at one point I understood there was just a box left in terms of the technology that was left in that space. So there is an agreement in place with AGT/TELUS for us to acquire all that space, and I've read your in-depth report, and I may have overlooked it, but I didn't see anything on that particular issue as to whether or not we are going to be able to scale into that space at some point, or what the status of that space is currently.
Through you, Your Worship. Certainly we've made note of use of the buildings that are next to the fire hall,
yeah.
As well as taking a look at the parking lot and the ownership of that because of the potential development issues within the town. There will need to be a number of potential renovations done within the fire hall as you move forward. For example, if you move to staffing, putting full-time staff on 24 hours a day in order to augment response. On nights you'll need dormitory space, etc. So certainly all of those space requirements will be needed.
Great. Councillor Hendricks, through your worship, as we move forward, we'll be looking at many of the aspects of the fire service review, and one of those being expansion, of course. To date, we've been unsuccessful to contact anybody with TELUS that's familiar with the agreement, okay. But I can commit to you that through the process of this review, we will be searching out that agreement that you speak about. Great. And once we're able to find it, hopefully capitalize on that opportunity.
Excellent. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and just quick, put the conversation in context. We've got the overview. I don't think we've got the implementation plan down yet, and so the intention is sort of tonight is to approve it and then send it back to admin to develop the implementation plan on what's here, not to develop the implementation plan while we're sitting at the table. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Well, thank you. Just through to the presenter, just a quick question on recommendation 15 with around the ladder truck. A couple of residents had asked in the past, based upon the fact that Beaumont is going to need higher densities and is having more four-story buildings, just maybe a comment from your review based upon the adequacy of our current ladder truck and then the short-term need identified for a new ladder truck. Maybe just some comments on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Through you, Your Worship. First of all, thank you for everyone who's spent time reading all 134 pages and all of the recommendations. The aerial apparatus is definitely key. You have buildings here that have significant height that you do need aerial access to gain access to in the event of a fire or other emergency. Apparatus typically have a 20-year lifespan, right? So most standards, whether it's the fire underwriters or the NFPA, typically put a 20-year lifespan on a piece of fire apparatus. So when you're looking at the current apparatus and its replacement cycle, and the fact that your next apparatus, because you're going to have it for 20 years, needs to be able to support that next 20 years of growth. So there is definitely a need, and the ability of a platform gives you a more stable, safer environment for your firefighters to work on, and really increases the operability at heights. Did I address your question appropriately?
Yeah, pretty close, yeah. So the vehicle that we have right now is meeting our current needs, given the lifespan, just paraphrasing, given the lifespan and the need for the next 20-year installment of that device, it has to be bigger and better to compensate for growth. Fair
That's
to say?
correct. Yes, sir.
How old is our current apparatus? That might put this into context.
Your worship, our current apparatus, or ladder truck, if you will, it's approaching 20 years.
Hence, it's now a short-term need.
Yep. Just a really quick follow-up?
Really quick follow-up, yep.
Yeah, just recommendation 16. It was around implementation of recommendations. Are we behind on any administrative duties with respect to the Alberta Emergency Management Agency?
I can answer that if you will, to Councillor Van Newkirk through your worship. In 2018, we went through a review of emergency program here at the town of Beaumont, receiving many accolades from Alberta Emergency Management Agency with few recommendations. We do have a position in place now who is a shared position, our health and safety coordinator, who also doubles as our emergency management coordinator. Now that we've just finished a process with the town of Beaumont, that focus of his will be working with myself, focusing on the recommendations found in this report and brought to us by the EMA. I can share with you there's very few, and many are already done. Perfect. But I would anticipate seeing that bylaw for an update or a refresh, if you will, in 2019.
Perfect, thank you. That's what I would have expected, so thank you.
Councillor McGoswin.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for the very detailed report. I think we all enjoyed reading through it, particularly kind of me first time going through it. It put a lot of things in perspective. So I'm glad to see that we're going to take this and come back. I'm just curious initially on a rough time frame on when you think you might be able to look into this and be able to come up with your own plan on how we could address these recommendations.
To Councillor Munkoff's through your worship, I don't have a defined timeline as of yet. Being a fire service review and a fire guy, I'm pretty excited about it, and it's obviously going to be a hot topic for myself. I would anticipate we'd be seeing something, I'd hope, around Q2 of 2019.
Okay.
That would be a rough timeline.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of specific ones. I mean, without getting into the details, but things, recommendation 4 about the full-time fire prevention officer, I was really appreciative to see that. We have it contracted right now, so looking forward to seeing and happy to see that this is a short term. I'll leave it to you to determine how short term that is, but I certainly appreciate that. A comment about your wording around additional paid on-call and full-time firefighters as the community grows. We're chatting to a bunch of the men and women who are the volunteers. Something that I didn't really expect to hear, but makes a lot of sense is, the more we go to that type of model, as you noted, a lot of these folks are working either for the city or full time, and they're kind of doing it in their off time. So the concern would be that we potentially lose a lot of that really strong resources, Your Worship being one of them, to be able to help fill that gap. So the concern that I have, so I'm just looking to hear your comments on potentially what that would do to our volunteer base by going to that paid on call or that full-time firefighter as the community grows. What the impact would be to our current volunteer ones.
Through your worship, it gives some of the younger volunteers greater incentive. Because they will have an opportunity to spend some actual shifts through the process. It also reduces some of the workload on the other volunteers because you'll have a first truck responding to a lot of the calls that wouldn't require a full callback of volunteers. You know, medical emergencies and that type of thing could be handled without a full callback. So we really see it as being beneficial to the current volunteer firefighting force, keeping them in reserve for the larger scale emergencies, but also for those who are looking perhaps at a full-time career down the road, they get more experience.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question maybe for administration. We don't have anyone from planning here, but the comment on page 100 talks about the leased parking lot in behind right now. Obviously, we're looking at that as part of the Saunterville project and everything that's happening downtown. Have we considered that as we're developing our planning process, as we're going through that the need for parking for these folks long term? CEO.
Through your worship, that is part of the overall planning, but we haven't got into a whole lot of the details of it just yet.
Yeah, so I'm sure they are, just making sure that we're talking to that. We're not trying to come up with some plan here that doesn't foresee the need for the additional parking that is required. And then the last comment from me is, I really appreciate putting the numbers down here in the short and medium term and potentially long term. We just went through our budget process, and one of the things that we as council committed to is making sure we are trying to invest heavily into our capital reserves for these very items. And you see the number of items that come up. And it's important for us to be prudent and start saving for these things as we go. So certainly appreciate council's position on that to save for these things, because it's not cheap, and there's plenty of other items that are going to be coming up. So it's good to see it and on paper here, black and white. So again, thanks very much for a very comprehensive report. Thank you.
Councillor Danlick.
Thank you, Worship. I've read the report.
Sorry, Councillor Stout.
That's okay.
I hit the right button, said the wrong name.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the presenters. Is this appropriate for me to just direct some comments regarding the report? Because I thought it was great. Very comprehensive, very detailed, very thorough, but actually quite readable. I think whoever is the author or the editor should be commended. I just picked up a couple of things that are trivia, really, just a couple of inconsistencies or errors. I was surprised to find that on page 45 that the deputy chief had been indicted. I think that means indicated.
It's like, what? What did I miss?
That's why I wasn't at work today.
I think that's 73 of 399 or 45 of the report. The other question I had was, and this is, what is the area of Beaumont? Is it because the report uses 25.86 square kilometres on page 64 and 26.86 square kilometres on 43 and 41. And it makes a difference in terms of then, if we calculate out the population densities, and which, because I'm who I am, I did. And that then led me to a question, which was, and this is the more, and I'm not understanding something here that you're saying. There are standards laid down here. National Fire Protection Association 1720, and it refers to urban areas with populations greater than 386 people per square kilometre, suburban areas between 103 and 386 per square kilometre, and rural areas less than 103, I assume. But then, further down on it says that with the current population of 19,000 and the present 25.86, although earlier in the report it refers to 26.86, this equates to a population density of 734 per square kilometre. Now that seems to me to be about twice what the urban area one was, and so I'm puzzled. because we're actually rated as suburban.
Through your worship, Councillor Stott, thank you for bringing that to my attention, and I'll have to go back and double check, have someone double check those numbers.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to point that out. One small further question. Does the change with the densification targets that we're now establishing with the new land use bylaw, does that have the potential to move us from suburban to urban as we go forward, as defined here?
If I may, Councillor Stout, through your worship, the new land use bylaw hasn't been presented to emergency management and training since it's reworking here the past few months. Unfortunately, I believe that's something we could look at while EMT looks at these numbers once again. That would satisfy your question.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. As my colleagues have already mentioned most of my questions, I'll be as brief, only one question then, and a very brief comment as well, too. I've read a number of reports in the last year being on council. This is an extremely well-written report, and it's easy to find things within it, and I know as a master plan going forward, it's going to be very helpful to us. I think we spent money well spent on this report. It's very well written and very easy to follow. And my question leads then on to, on page 39 of the report, it talks about the paid on-call firefighters and how they would function into our system as we go from predominantly a volunteer system of firefighting into, at some point down the road, presumably a full-time service as we get into that 45,000 population. Just give me a quick, if you could, based on your experience, observation of how long we could use paid on-call firefighters to transition us from predominantly a volunteer service to a full-time service down the road. Would there be a 10, 15-year sort of transitionary gap, or?
You certainly, based on your current call volume and projecting it out, we would anticipate over the next 10 years it would be a viable option.
Okay.
Call volumes sometimes don't directly relate to population growth. Sometimes there are other factors that enter into that, so you would always have to be monitoring the types of calls, how often multiple calls were being received, and how many calls were occurring. So for example, if you have an aging population, as we're seeing in some communities, the number of calls per capita goes up dramatically. So all that has to be monitored over the next however, we would see this as being a viable option for at least a 10-year period.
Thank you. One last quick follow-up.
One last one, yeah.
Thank you very much. I remember reading the report how it talks extensively on the requirements when the truck leaves the station on a call. It requires 4 firefighters on the vehicle, so it gets to the destination on property, has time to get set up, fire hydrant, all that. I understand now why. Is it, I didn't understand from the report though, is that a requirement of a certain law, or that's the rule of thumb? My thoughts are, being a firefighter, predominantly a volunteer service, I'm being a bit facetious to make a point to understand the concept, is that if the chief and his deputy are in the station, a call comes in, they can't really take the truck and drive out, and 2 guys meet them at the fire itself. They go to the station first, get their gear, hop in their pickup truck and meet them at the station and try and condense that response time downwards. The way to read the report, they really can't leave the station until they have 4 guys on the truck. Is that a proper interpretation of the report, or am I missing something? Just a more of a general question.
Through you, Your Worship, the key is 4 firefighters arriving simultaneously.
Right. That's perfect, right?
That's perfect.
Right.
So that the quicker that can occur, the faster that you can make an interior attack. You can't do that with less than 4 firefighters safely.
Right. 2 in, 2 out was the report. I get that totally. So I guess my question is, can the truck actually leave the station without 4 firefighters on it, or they have to have 4 firefighters there? Just curiosity.
So there's no legislation to that effect.
Right. But the 2 in, 2 out rule.
That's best practice.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you very much.
If I may add to that as well, through your worship, to Councillor Daniluk, National Fire Protection Association, you would have read that term in the report quite a number of times, is a recommended best practice for fire services throughout North America. NFPA is also used in the event a fire service is being reviewed or under scrutiny, if you will, in the event we have no policies in place. We currently do have extensive standard operating guidelines and procedures in place for such events. Agreed, 4 firefighters on your first arriving apparatus, a fire engine, is key and crucial for setting up to combat a structure fire. Further to answer your question with regards to would 2 individuals leave on a truck, it's very situational dependent. We always run 2 apparatus as the report identified to a monitored alarm or a structure fire, for example, first one being an engine, second being the ladder truck. That ladder truck has and will again in the future go out with 2 staff on board when we unfortunately are at a time we don't have any volunteers available. So it has happened. I hopefully answer your question.
Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Hendricks, and then we'll wrap.
Thank you, Your Worship, and there's not too many questions left on my list, but thank you very much. Very comprehensive report. And my question is regarding the mixed-purpose mobile training unit. And I'm just wondering, I imagine you've looked at all different options around that. You've looked at whether to build a training facility or have a mobile one. So I'm not really sure what this looks like, or I know you must set a fire and put it out somewhere, but I'm not sure what that's all about. My question is really around collaboration with the county. Is there any opportunity for sharing, or is that already maxed out and we need to add supplies to that? So,
through your worship, the fire department and the chief and the deputy are very active in the collaborations with the county and the training association for the greater Edmonton area. So there are a lot of discussions with that. One of the advantages of a mobile training unit is that you could share it. You could, for example, rent it out to your neighbors or other fire services that could find use of it. Certainly cost-effective wise, building a structure now with the new NFPA standards that are coming out, that'll be out in 2019 with regards to new training facilities. If you build them, you're looking at multiple millions of dollars to build a training facility. So therefore, the recommendation is
if I may just ask, what do we do now?
Through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, currently we utilize and rent the training facility from our friends at Leduc County. They do have a certified training facility in Nisku that we do attend multiple times per year. Beyond that as well, we use our own facilities here within the town, and plus next year in 2019 we're actually looking at renting the burn tower at Vermilion, which is the provincial fire school here within the province for training for our members. One of the concerns, if you will, with utilizing the same training facility over and over is familiarization of a firefighter. So, for example, if I go in, it's my 3rd time in, I know I take 10 steps this way, hang a quick left, hang a right, I'm at the seat of the fire because we're entering through the same door. So the reason, again, we're looking at Vermilion is to change that up, as no fire is the same.
So it would help the entire region, I would assume, then,
Yes.
as well. Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Chip, and my question is actually to the administration, just with respect to all the upgrades and certainly this report and then the infrastructure that we've put in over the years with respect to hydrants and what have you, and we've facilitated hydrant installations in some of the older subdivisions that weren't up to NFPA requirements. How does this story get passed on to our insurance providers for the community?
To Councillor Hendricks, through your worship, a little over a year ago, actually I believe it was one of my first visits to council, I was fortunate to bring the Fire Service Underwriters Review to council. And the Fire Service Underwriters is an independent body that goes around through provinces reviewing fire services and providing them a grade, which is used by insurance providers. As we reported back, and I'm sorry I don't have the date with me, we actually our grading improved, which saw an improvement throughout town and brought us very close to actually dropping insurance rates for some residents within town. This report, upon implementation of some of the steps, would be as simple as myself reporting or requesting another review of the town of Beaumont by the Fire Service Underwriters. Right. It does take a little bit of time, but again, that's a process we would go through to improve our rating.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming in tonight. I have one final comment that I didn't hear brought up, but it's more comment than question. It identified the HERF and our ability to meet with response times and all those relations. So It'll be interesting to see over the next, into Q2, how we're going to solve those issues, because they have planning and development concerns as well as fire response concerns. So, final question, but thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive report. Thank you very much for coming in tonight, and we'll let you go. Oh, I need a couple of motions. You're right. Can I get a councillor to move we accept the report and return it to admin for an implementation plan? Councillor Daniluk.
So move, Your Worship. Thank you.
Discussion on the motion? Seeing none? All in favor? Okay. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to, Mr. Hills.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a friendly amendment. Administration would ask that you approve the report opposed to accept it and bring it back with the implementation plan.
Friendly amendment accepted. Does council have a problem with that? No, fair enough. And we're going to take 5 because we've been sitting for an hour and 10, so.
it's on pages 43 and 41, it's 26.86.
I thought we had most of those, but I guess we didn't catch them all. 40, right here, and you said 41 and 46?
41 and
43. Okay.
That
Yeah.
was...
Okay. So those are those are
They calculate them out.
Yeah. So I'll just send those and they can do it. Yeah. Yeah, that's what he said.
And they said that they might have used the old
Yeah. Yeah.
area instead.
Okay.
So, all right, so call the meeting back to order. Moving on to business item 8B, Beaumont Arts Policy. Mr. Hilton, Ms. Cuthbert.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Tonight we're looking for a decision on the draft arts policy. The Beaumont Society of the Arts has presented to Council on a number of occasions since 2016. Council has directed administration to work with the Society on the development of an art and culture policy and realistic funding formula moving forward. April 17th, 2018, a presentation was received from the BSA on its history and strategic direction. May 15th, 2018, a draft copy of the Town of Beaumont Arts and Culture Policy was presented to Council for review and feedback. Committee members directed administration to formalize a policy for Council approval. Over the last 2 years, administration and Beaumont Society of the Arts have been meeting and working together on this draft policy. This policy has been developed at a high level to serve as a foundational document and reference point for future decisions. The funding portion of this policy has been developed to increase the amount of operational funding for the arts, events, programs, and services striving to achieve a mutually acceptable balance between sport, recreation, art, and culture programming within the town. It does not represent the amount of sole funding for the society. The draft art policy is written to include Beaumont French, Indigenous, and agricultural heritage. Beaumont Society of the Arts is proposing to develop an arts councillor similar to the library board that would champion the arts and culture community in Beaumont and area. This policy will govern the actions of Beaumont with respect to the arts, establishing the place of arts in the community, define utilizing the arts, assist with decision-making with respect to art promotion and communication, rationalizing the services of Beaumont for assisting the arts. This draft policy outlines the responsibility areas including Beaumont Art Council, art education and cultural literacy, cultural facility and art infrastructure, municipal funding and the arts and cultural development in Beaumont and region, public art and artistic freedom and media awareness. In conclusion, administration is requesting one of three decisions this evening. That one, Council approves the Beaumont art policy as presented. That Council make amendments to the Beaumont art policy and bring back later to Council meeting. That Council does not approve the Beaumont art policy at this time.
Fair enough. Sorry, I gotta find my note here. Okay, so thank you very much for all the hard work and effort that's gone into this. I know there's been a lot of back and forth between members of the Beaumont Society of the Arts and administration. After a thorough review of this, I'm going to move that Council return this to administration for a little more work and a little more negotiation, because there's three things in it and that I'm a little concerned with. One is I really don't understand the funding policy and funding mechanism, the ratio, how that works. And if I don't understand it, people reading it aren't going to understand it. How that works. The 1%, the 1% portion, what type of projects and capital equipment make up that? So we need a little more detail surrounding there. And I'm really confused as to why we need three separate councils. We have council, we have the Beaumont Society of the Arts, and we have this Arts Council. And I'm not quite clear on what the roles of each of those are. I think we have one extra council or one extra organization involved, and I'll go from there. But I'll open it up to members of council for comment. Councillor McGuswain.
not where I thought we'd start, but let me start off by saying I'm really proud that this council, I think, has made provide a lot of support for arts in this community. I think, we've provided a lot of significant steps. Obviously, a lot of work being done by the folks here to get us there. But I truly think this could be one of the defining legacies of this council, and I'm really proud to be part of that. I think we've got an opportunity here. So I did want to acknowledge all the hard work that was done to put this in place, and with administration on that. With regards to pushing it back, let me address, so you talked about the funding policy, the 1%, 3 different councils. I think those are fair questions. I think we can address them today, and hopefully we've got the answers that we can address today. Previously on some other, on the grants policy, which we'll get to, one of your comments was, let's get it in place, let's give it a go. I would be in more favor of, I like where we're at today. I think the questions you have are legitimate, and I'd like to get those answers. But I can't see why we can't, get those answers and have the discussion around how comfortable people are with the 1% and the 34 cents and that sort of thing. But I would like to see this approved now. There's been a lot of work done on it, and I think if we get the answers you're looking for, I'd like to approve this, essentially, I think when I read through it, it made sense to me, and I'm supportive of it. So those are my opening comments.
Well, fair enough. If we can get through it and to a point where we're all comfortable, I have no problem with council defeating the motion and moving on. That's never an issue. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, just through the presenters and the public. So personally, I'm support the spirit of having an arts policy. I think I've spoken up positively in that regard a few times now. I've heard some passionate pleas. I've seen a lot of work, and I've seen a lot of effort go into it to get to this point, so I definitely support that. I also support having the Arts Council idea in Beaumont. As some of you may remember, I previously spoke up during our committee and board review and asked that administration hold off on asked that we not follow administration's recommendations, and they had recommended not forming an arts council and not forming a sports committee. So, so I'm happy that that happened, and we're here in this spot. I do share some of the policy-specific concerns brought forward by the mayor. Happy to talk about them now. Happy to talk about them at back at committee of the whole. It doesn't, where we discuss it, is just a matter of timing. For me, I think that we land on a solid arts policy, and if administration has answers tonight to some of our questions, then perhaps we get there tonight. But we may not find them all, and we may end up back at a committee of the whole. So whichever way we go, I support the spirit of what we're trying to do, which is get a arts policy in place and to look at a separate arts council. Yeah, that's what I would have to say. Thank you.
Fair enough. Councillor Barnhart, comments?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the presenters and to the arts community that's done a lot of work. To your point, Mayor Stewart, I believe this has had quite a bit of consultation and has been back and forth several times, so I really don't want to see it go back to the administration again if we can deal with it tonight. I would agree with Councillor Munkoff-Swain that we can answer some of these concerns. At least I think the administration and the arts community can. One in particular about the why 3 bodies, 2 would be enough. The one body, being a society, is not our call. That's the community's right to have their own society. If they see a need to continue it, so be it. Mm-hmm. As far as we're concerned, we have a council. Of course, council does many things. Arts is one specific thing that a subgroup can look after, and I think it's complex enough and large enough that makes sense to me. But we can have that debate. About the funding, I was going to ask that question, so I agree with you that there's some lack of clarity about what happens when the recreation funding goes up. Does that mean the arts funding goes up? What happens if it goes down? Is that what we mean by that? And I would like that clarified.
And just which line items in the budget form that ratio?
Yeah, well, so I just think we need to have that conversation to make sure we're all on board with that. But I think we could get it done now. So the only other thing I'd add is that the implementation of this comes with the terms of reference, and I would have some comments about terms of reference if it does come back to council. So,
fair enough.
Thank you.
Further comments from members of council? Okay, so we think we can get it done tonight. My concern is that those 3 points are large and explanatory, or they're large, and they need to point, and we may need to have a meeting with the Beaumont Society of the Arts to get it together to finish it off. But I'll sit there and go, so what do you want to tackle first? The funding model?
Yeah, you just started there, so.
All right, Mr. Hiltz, can you walk us through the funding model and how we can bring some clarity into the language surrounding in this policy?
Thank you, Worship, members of council. So through our discussions with Beaumont Society of the Arts and the research that we had conducted with other municipalities it was common practice that arts funding was at like a 3-to-1 ratio to sport and recreation within a community. So what we had further discussions about that, like what all does that include? Does that include everything from every facility? Does that include libraries? Does that include all these different things? And we kind of, and through the negotiations, we worked that down to a workable number. And we said programs and services that positively, so this is like Beaumont programs and services that positively impacted arts and culture. So that'd be like our community events, the money that goes into those. Figure skating is one that would be like a cultural or an arts program. It didn't include a lot of stuff with the Aquafit Center, for example, because that's more physical sport. So we broke it down into that, and we came up with a number, and it was about $650,000. Then we basically, or a little bit more than that, then we broke it down further, and we said, well, the 3-to-1 ratio is about a 34-cent to the dollar number. So when we broke it down to that number, we went back through it again, and we looked at the numbers and stuff like that. We saw that there was a bit of a deficit between what we currently spend on those programs and what we can currently contribute to arts and culture programming in Beaumont. And that's what the town directly delivers to arts and culture program in Beaumont. It's not what all of those little things that happen outside of the town. And we came up with that number, and it was about $450,000. So we're about $175,000 difference there. And so what we had said is that we'd work towards bridging that gap. So to further to what Councillor Barnhart had said, if that funding goes up in the spending of in sport and recreation, arts and culture would go up. If that funding goes down, the arts and culture would go down a bit as well. It's not the money that we're giving directly to the Beaumont Society of the Arts or the Beaumont Arts Council. This is what we are spending. It includes what we give them in terms of our grant funding and stuff, or what we give to the Blues and Roots Festival, what we give to the society. It's our overall package, is what that number is. So it's just basically saying that we're committed to arts and culture funding in Beaumont. And so that's kind of how that funding model came up. And we're just trying to write it so it kind of made sense within not taking pages and pages of explanation. So if that needs to be cleared up a bit, we can do that. But I think that after, when you're writing these policies and you're going through them, what would make sense in your head sometimes may not make sense in someone else's.
Just before we go to council, does that include the offsetting revenue that comes from some of these programs that we present? Or is that just the total spend? Well, like, I don't know. Figure skating, do we charge diminished revenue to it? And then, so is it the difference between what we take in and tax supported, or?
We did not break it down like that. What we were spending. So it was what our spend was. Because a lot of our programs we do the direct spend on. It's not so much that when we provide ice and stuff like that, we provide ice to that service. It's at this cost.
Councillor McGosway.
Thank you, Your Worship. So to summarize, I think Council has addressed the 3-to-1 comment before, and essentially what you're saying is this policy would bridge the gap of about 175,000.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes when you say when you say the number, I think that makes it a bit more real, and personally I think that's very reasonable to get to where we want to go. So does that that satisfies the answer for me? Does that bridging gap of 175K, does that, any other questions or concerns on that?
Councillor Barnhart, comments?
Not on that point.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I guess my concern would be, does that have to, can we express that more, this question's already been asked, can we express that more precisely? Or
But, I mean, depending on where the funding goes, the gap is going to be different, right? So you're never going to be able to write a nice, pretty number.
No, but we can write. I'm not expecting a concrete number, but we can write a, add these up and subtract this, and that's going to be the value. I think the mayor referred to it previously when he asked what line items are included or excluded.
My thought is it says, we heard the explanation about what recreation and sport is, and so we're committed to spending, 34 cents of that. So I don't know how else it could be. And I mean, to Mr. Hiltz's point, it made sense to him, made sense to me.
But perhaps, but he also commented that after he'd been looking at this for a long enough time, he no longer knew whether it made any sense to anybody else. Am I paraphrasing you, or is that Mr. Hiltz?
I thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. One of the difficulties of being that specific in the policy is that when we take a program out or we change a program, the policy needs to be updated.
Yes.
So that becomes very, very onerous on both sides, for the arts council, for the Arts Society, and for administration and for council. What we have committed to is that we will provide them a comprehensive review as part of this policy every 3 years, so they would get a sense of how that was calculated. And those numbers we went through this the first time. Our budget is presented in such a way that it's inclusive of everything. So we had to basically do a lot of breakdown and stuff like that, how we got to that number.
Yes.
And that number was agreed to by both parties of how we came up with, I should say, the math to come up with that percentage, or that $175,000.
Councillor Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the presenters, I think I hear the explanation. I understand what you're saying. The hang-up I have is of what? That's the piece, the hang-up that I have is the of what, and that's the part that you alluded to at the end that is the hard piece to, what I would like to avoid. So when we're finished this policy, because we're going to finish it, so when we finish this policy, I would like to avoid, as best we can, a situation where there are going to be discrepancies or interpretations that can be brought forth from one side or the other to include or exclude. And I know that's maybe pie in the sky, but I think we need to do a little bit more work on of what. It's either, there's two ways. Either we do more work on the of what piece, or else we leave it alone and give it a go. And of what is important to me, I think, for this spend and the public art spend, because there's two spends that we'll talk about. So, yeah.
Councillor Danlock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to reply?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Is that one of the things we could do is within the definition section, is we could do a better job defining what positively impacts Beaumont in terms of that.
Perhaps a such as statement, or... Yeah.
Councillor Danlock?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's fair to say that this council is more friendly to the arts than other previous councils have been, just from feedback I've got from the community. And I think all of us want to get a good, solid arts policy in place. I'm hesitant to send it back to committee as well, but at the same time, too, I'm more concerned making the right decision and make sure we get things done correctly, because as a councillor, I'm out there defending council's decisions. If I can't defend it with confidence and clearly understand what's going on, I have trouble defending it. And I'm having a little trouble with this funding model still. And I respect Councillor McCobb-Swain and Councillor Bonhart's comments of trying to get it done tonight. I respect that. But I want to make sure it's clear in my mind before I go any further. So I'm not delaying the process deliberately. I know we have sensitive art people in the audience, and I get that. I want to have a policy as well, too, but I want to make sure we get it done correctly. And so I'm looking at the policy now, if you don't mind my comments here, in that it says funding will be at 3-to-1 ratio for every dollar spent that Beaumont strives to spend on sports and rec activities. So I guess what I need to find for my peace of mind is, what exactly do we spend on sports rec activities? What is that number? And is it comprised of 6 items, 12 items, 14 items, and that totals $600,000? versus what we spend on the arts, and that totals 400. Difference of 2 in my example. It's 175 in the policy. So I respect the fact we can't put those exact things in the policy as it's written, but I can't get my head around the funding model while knowing exactly what was sports and activities and what is arts, to understand the ratio and the logic behind it. That's my hang-up with tonight. So if we can get that done tonight, great, but I'm not trying to delay things, but
Well, one of the things I don't like to get into during council meetings is crafting policy language. So
I understand.
I'd rather give
Can
them
I
all the
speak to that
suggestions.
really quick?
No, well, when I'm done. When we get it, that's why it's rather get the suggestions in, send it back, get it rewritten, and then have a look at what the final draft looks like. I hate to, and I'm no offense to admin, but if you approve something as amended, it's got to come back that way, and you got to review it because it might not be the way you wanted it amended. So that's my hesitation tonight. I'm not trying to unnecessarily delay the process, but I'm still struggling with the details, and the devil's in the details. So you can have a 30-second rebuttal, then we're going to Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. And really quickly, I totally get it. If we're not all there, I support wherever we want to go. The key thing for me in this, you've heard that explanation. The key phrase that I think was mentioned was that this is a reference point. It's a foundational document, a reference point, right? And so they're going to be able to use this to go forward and make decisions on this as a reference point. And I think that soft language might be able to get you through. Let's give it a go. Let's see if something blatantly comes up, and if there is, a discrepancy on what arts thinks versus what administration thinks, then maybe we need to address it. But I don't think you're ever going to get something written down here that is as specific as you need. That's why I think by identifying it as a reference point could potentially help get you through that. So that's my comment.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And similarly, it seems to me that we've mixed in the budget with the policy, and that's what's causing the problem. And one of the ways that I can suggest around that would be to put subject to budget availability in both the, well, in 6.41, and which still leaves it in council's hands to determine what that amount is. And that's, I think the policy itself, if I take the budget number out of there, is the direction that council is seeking. It's the specifics that are getting us into trouble. And you're right, they're not as specific as we need them to be. But we're not approving the budget tonight. So if we can agree that this is the direction, at least it gives the arts community the sense of we're going in this direction. But as to the specific dollar amounts, to be determined based on budget availability. Because we don't know what it is. We don't know what recreation is going to be from one year to the next. So the direction is, what would I say, a third of the recreation budget. I'm not sure I like the tying it to the recreation budget, but at the same time, even if you took all of that out of there, the funding specifics, and approved the policy per se, and the budget discussion came back at another time, that might be a way to go. But I'd like to see us get the majority of this done tonight, because we're hamstrung by the budget amounts.
Councilman Nugent.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, the presenters, and the public. I hear you. One of the concerns I have is that if we put language anytime, I think that anytime we put subject to budget, everything's always subject to budget. So, that we already have that, right, inherently. But I understand what you're trying to do. The monetary part is maybe some of the hang up in here and try to do that. Then I think we're getting down that crafting policy on the fly, rabbit hole, I guess, which, I'm catching myself in because I'm wanting to say yes, but I'm still hesitating because of that. And then the other thing that I would say is that one of the things council talked about and I've talked about is having a line item and having some predictable funding. And I feel that if we put a caveat statement in there, maybe it takes some of the predictability out of it for that group, and maybe they feel not as confident to count on that, right? And so this is where I kind of come back to the of what, and maybe we can have a little bit more meat to each of the funding descriptions. So that's enough for me, but there's some thoughts anyways.
Well, that brings up another question for me now. I hadn't thought of that before. So does the total funding go to the Arts Council in the Beaumont Society of the Arts of this whole 1/3, or does it count towards all the rest of things like the Blues and Roots that
Yes.
aren't currently under there but are on a line item and
yeah.
things like that? So how do we?
Yeah, it was defined that that the funding would that's just part of that funding. The money that goes to the Beaumont Societies of the Arts of what we provide for their events, etc., and a position maybe in the future, whatever else, that's just part of that funding. Everything that we contribute is on top of that. So basically, or is inclusive of that. So for the Blues and Roots Festival is part of that funding package, for example.
Okay. Further comments? Honestly, you guys, I think we're crafting policy on the fly, and this really does need to go back to committee of the whole. Like, I know we want to approve it tonight, and honestly, it's almost there, but the devil's in the details, and I'm really uncomfortable crafting policy on the fly. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship, and through you and back to the rest of council, yes, I'm anxious to get this passed as soon as possible, have a policy in place, and the sooner the better is undoubtedly the case. And I haven't heard anybody here express a desire to do other than that, to get this done. That said, I think it's really important that we get it right, and that it is the right policy, and that we're all satisfied that it's the right policy. And if we can't do that tonight, then there really is no other alternative than to pass it back to committee and take another cut at it.
Councillor Van Newkirk? Oh, sorry.
All I was going to say was, and if that occasions a loss of a month to make sure that the arts policy is correct and that the arts policy that we've got in place is correct and satisfies everybody, then I think that's probably worthwhile.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
Yeah, just procedurally, is there we've chatted for quite a bit of time. Is there a motion on the floor to move this back to committee of the whole?
Yes.
I would move.
It's to move it back to administration, but I'll amend it to go move it back to committee of the whole and do some work.
I will support the motion currently on the floor.
Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, actually to Mr. Schwartz, if he could give us some guidance, some leadership here, given what you heard, where should we be going next?
Theo.
Well, at the risk of jumping into the debate, I think the mayor's described the conversation exactly, and this is crafting policy on the fly. From administration's perspective, we'd like to get it right because we're going to be held accountable for enforcing it. And if we can't agree amongst all of council, then we're creating a dog's breakfast here.
Councillor Barnhart.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and at the risk of sounding like I'm creating a dog's breakfast, I don't think that it's the policy as much as it's the funding envelope, and that's the policy. To me, I'm not hearing any of council saying that they don't agree with the policy. I'm hearing councillors say they don't know clear enough what the funding amount is. And to me, that's a very different question, which I think we could send back to the administration. We need to see a terms of reference anyway for the Arts Council and say at the same time tell us what this translates to in dollars, and that's subject to council's approval. So I don't think we're crafting policy. I think we're debating what's in and what's out of sports and recreation and with arts and culture. I don't think someone saying they don't agree with that basis on which to determine the amount. It's just what is the amount. But I could be wrong, but I'm not hearing people are having trouble with that formula.
Depends. Councillor McGuff-Swain.
Yeah, I think Councillor Barnhart summed it up very well. There's a difference between crafting policy on the fly and not understanding it. So I think, I don't support the motion on the floor. If this is defeated, or I guess if your motion passes, I think we need to be very clear here on what we're actually looking for. We need to give direction to them on specifically what, so we've only covered one of those three things. Our committee of the whole agendas are incredibly large, as we experienced last week. There's a lot of work, time that goes into us from administration. I won't get back into my rant on this, but I think if we are going to delay it, we need to give them direction, and that there should be very clear on these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that we're looking for. If it is purely just around the funding, then that's a pretty straight up conversation. But let's not open up into the actual policy about, the arts education, cultural literacy. Beaumont will encourage support educational initiatives. I think people are very comfortable with that. So we just need to make sure we provide clear direction so that they know what they have to go back and look at, and more importantly, what not to look at. So again, I'll be voting against the motion on the floor, but I hope we can provide some clear direction.
Councillor Van Newkirk?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess specifically what I would suggest is 6.4.1 speaks to the 3-to-1 ratio and that piece. 6.4.5 speaks of entering into a funding agreement and outlines terms and conditions, of which Councillor Barnhart alluded to requiring. And then 6.5.1 speaks of the 1%. For this is in the public art policy. To that I would say of what, and if there are any cutoffs or if there's perhaps a maximum. I believe in the past we had heard that some municipalities or urban municipalities may have a maximum. So that was, those are the funding questions that I had for tonight, looking for those specifics.
And then I would add the governance piece.
Pardon? Oh, governance.
All right. So that being the specific directions, anybody else want to add to the list? All right. So I'm going to call the question. The motion is to, the amended motion is to refer this to a committee of the whole meeting. Administration to bring back information on those items outlined by Councillor Van Newkirk, and then we'll finish that discussion at committee of the whole and then bring back a completed policy for approval. Long-winded, but go ahead.
Could I just time you out here? Committee of the whole meeting, which one? Given that we have some.
Well, I'm going to propose that we don't cancel the 18th.
Okay, because
and bring it back to the 18th.
That's why I'm going there. It is in here, so.
Yeah. Is that doable?
I would suggest that we look at the January meeting. However, if we have to work towards the 18th of December, we'll have to work towards the 18th of December. There's more than just us involved in this.
How about this? We work towards the 18th, you come back to the next council meeting and tell me if we're going to make that date. And then we can amend it if we have to. Fair? Okay. Is everybody clear on the question? Call the question. Motion passes 5-2. So going back to committee of the whole. All right. Item 8C, 2019 Budget and Financial Plan Presentation. Mr. Harris. Apparently, nobody wants to hear you talk.
So I'll make it real short. Sorry. Have to have a sense of humor.
Yeah, it's only 40 million bucks.
Okay.
Capital.
Through your worship, recommendation is as follows: that council accept the recommendations relating to the town's presentation of the 2019 budget, 2019-2023 financial plan, and 2019-2023 capital plan for information, and forward the budget for approval at council's regular meeting of December 11th, 2018.
That's all we get?
That's all you get.
All righty then. Quick, sweet. Questions from members of council? Actually, we'll do this properly. Can I get a motion that council accept the recommendations relating to the town's 2019 budget, 2019-23 financial plan, and the 2019-23 capital plan for information, and forward the budget to the regular council meeting of December 11, 2018 for approval? Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, so moved.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Harris. Just a curiosity, from when I look at the options that we have in the request for decision, if we were to say we liked option 2, does that mean that's a possibility that it would go directly with no consultation? Is that what that means?
Option 2, yes, but it would mean that you adopt it as of today.
That would be rather unusual, but that.
You could do that, but you could also have an open house after that, the budget open house, and provide that to look for feedback from the public. There has been ample opportunity for the public to provide feedback through the budget workshop, through the committee of the whole, and even at this presentation. And the open houses can be held to present the budget to the public, and they can provide the feedback at that time, and we could provide to you at the December 11th meeting concerns that have been raised, if any concerns are raised. But I have not personally received anything in regards to the budget from the public outside of the survey that we did, and yeah.
But you're not recommending that. That's just another option.
My preference would be that it goes to December 11th for approval after the open houses to, to provide public one last chance. And they can't say that the method was changed in midstream. Having said that, Mr. Swartz and myself had a quick discussion as to how we'll do the process next year. And we are looking at some interesting software available for the public to do decisions or make comments online and what the impact is. So we're looking at that to be made available for next year. And the budget open houses maybe have it a lot sooner than we have in the past, i.e. Right after the committee of the whole, and then go into the budget approval. So that's what we're looking at. But if you're asking me for my recommendation, I would just say to forward it to December 11th and go from there.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I would hesitate to approve it outright before we do those open houses and do that feedback, because the public is expecting that. So not sure I would do. But there's been a lot of time, effort, 3 days of budget workshop, committee of the whole. Once again, my thanks to the administration and council for wading through it and putting together the budget. I think it's a strong budget. I think it's a great budget. And I'm prepared to move forward. If there's no further discussion on the motion, I'm going to call the question. All right. Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Brings us to council meeting cancellation request. Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to council, members of the public. In the past, council meetings in December have been canceled to accommodate for elected officials and administration absences during the holidays. If the meetings are considered for being canceled and any business that needs to be addressed, a special council meeting would be called pursuant to the provisions of the Municipal Government Act. At this time, administration is supporting that council the December 25th, 2018 regular council meeting, and given the last discussion that we had, pull the December 18th committee off the whole for a motion on that one and just have a motion move forward for the December 25th.
Do I have a member of council willing to move the motion to cancel the December the 25th meeting? Councillor Stokes.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I move that we cancel the December the 25th regular council meeting.
No, I want to be here. No, I'm just kidding. My wife will kill me. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Barnard.
Just a question, Your Worship, then, given the previous conversation. So the administration wasn't sure they were going to make it in time for the December 18th, so are you going to let us know?
They'll bring we have a December 11th meeting, Is that enough time to cancel it if we?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Barnhart. That does give us enough time with regards to the cancellation of it, because we do have a couple of weeks before that meeting.
So they'll bring us an update at that meeting, and then we'll see if we can make it. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through you to administration. So, irregardless of the previous conversation, I was going to suggest that we cancel the December 25th meeting, but actually keep the December 18th meeting, because our committee of the whole agendas have been pretty packed, and we have a lot to get through. And I feel that keeping that meeting on the books would have been a prudent thing to do. So
that's what's currently proposed.
You betcha. So that's irrespective of the first conversation. That's what I was going to do tonight, was suggest that. So I would support what's being proposed.
Further discussion on the motion? No? All right. All in favor? Councillor Montgomery. That carries unanimously. Next meeting on the list, Community Grants Program Policy C15 for approval. Mr. Alan Harris.
Through your worship to council, public, and those watching through live media. Before you is a recommendation for council to approve policy C15.1 community grant program and rescind policy C15 grants, donations, and funding policy. At the council's committee of the whole meeting on October 16, 2018, council directed staff to make changes to the policy as presented. And those are highlighted through the RFD, specifically under the policy statement page 1, the wording add value to Beaumont was added to the last sentence. Then under responsibilities, again, the wording as to the value to Beaumont was added to the sentence to read, the following ranking criteria will be used by the GFAC to rank all applications as to the value added to Beaumont. The Community Grant Program Policy C15.1 Procedures Attachment 2, Funding Availability, page 1, the wording annually 1% of the previous year's municipal property requisition will be made available for grants under the Community Grant Program was deleted and replaced with funding will be determined during the annual budget workshop. If I may make an editorial comment in regards to the earlier conversation on arts policy discussions, I think to be consistent between this, which is a grant, and would impact potential arts people coming forward, that same wording be included and may dictate no December 18th meeting. Having said that, I'll continue. Under basics, page 1, the last sentence where it reads operating core funding requests will not exceed 1 year was deleted. The Community Grant Program Funding Application Attachment 3, declaration page 12, where as it reads, deliver 6 complete copies of the grant application. 2 has been changed to read, deliver 1 copy, which can be electronic. Then Community Grant Program Applications Guide, Attachment 4, over page 3, where as it reads, deliver 6, again changed to 1 copy. And then 1.4, eligible applications, page 6, where it reads funding request is at or between 1,000 and 10,000 has been changed to read funding request is a minimum of 1,000, and where it reads groups can receive funding for 3 consecutive years, after which they may not apply for next 2 intakes, be changed to read groups can receive one-time funding for 3 consecutive years, after which they may not apply for the next 2 intakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Lots of work's gone into this policy as well, and it was nice. It's nice to see that, as near as I can remember and match up when I was going through the prep for this meeting, that all of Council's recommendations from the committee of the whole meeting have been incorporated. So I am proud to support this tonight, and I ask, is there a member of Council willing to make the motion that Council adopt policy C15.1 Community Grant Program and rescind policy C15 Grants, Donations, and Funding Policy? Councillor Stout.
So moved, Your Worship.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
So I just want to make sure I understand that the groups that we have given line item funding to are not limited in number of years of operating grants that they can get.
That is correct.
So again, those are the Arts Society, the Blues and Roots, Heritage, and the Ag Society?
Yes.
Those are the four?
Yes.
So they can apply for additional grants if they wanted to for one-time only type of things?
Yes,
But not for operating funds, because they're getting that separate?
Yes.
And we did have discussion as council back at the budget workshop of putting a multi-year funding policy in place for those groups.
Right, so I just wanted to make sure I had that right.
Yep.
Further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That carries. Carries unanimously. Which leads us to bylaw 9A, bylaw 936-18, or item 9A, bylaw 936-18, 2019 fees and charges, first reading. Mr. Harris.
Thank you. Through your worship to council, the public, before you is a recommendation to approve bylaw 936-18, the 2019 fees and charges. Further to the RFD, council included in the budget that council is moving forward on page 208 of 399. Effectively speaks to the fees and charges that have been included or have been changed as part of this bylaw. And so it's, again, it's here for first reading, consideration of first reading.
Thank you very much. Do I have a member of council willing to move first reading? Councillor Barnhart.
So moved, Your Worship.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, just a question on the Ken Nickel facility fees and charges and the issue of the rental of the actual rink space itself, perhaps not with or without ice. The parking lot, does that not become part of that rental, or why is the parking lot separate from the rental? If you're going to rent this space, do you not get the parking lot for the same rate?
In regards to, through your worship, to Councillor Hendricks and the rest of council, and Mr. Hiltz can correct me if I'm wrong, effectively the rental of the building, of the use of the ice is good, and people can park there and there's no charge for parking. It's when you do an event within the building and an event on the parking lot, within the parking lot, which are two separate areas to do events for. So that's why it's been included. We're not charging for parking. So if somebody's
like
running...
the tour of Alberta.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Like the tour of Alberta.
Yeah.
Right, but if somebody rents the rink,
yeah,
ice or no ice,
yeah,
they get the parking lot with that rent?
No, they don't.
No, they don't?
No.
They get to park in the parking lot. They don't get to hold an event in the parking lot.
No, what I'm saying is, like, if you rent the rink,
yeah,
that cost includes the parking lot.
No.
Includes?
No, so through your worship.
Like,
I'm
you're gonna go
confused. You got me confused now.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So you pull up, because you're going to be inside the building that you rented, but because you're parking, you're being charged for the parking, along with the rent of the facility.
No. Parking is not charged. What it is when you're holding an event within the parking lot or on the parking lot grounds. It's not for parking.
Okay.
So when you rent inside, the parking is free because you're paying for the facility. But when you do an event on the parking lot, that is where those fees cut in.
Okay, so if now you get an RV that shows up because the people in the RVs are using the rink, then they're charged an RV rent for the parking lot?
No.
Yes.
They are?
They were.
Okay.
That's why I'm wondering.
Okay, so we'll pass it to Mr. Hiltz.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm really confused now.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So the way that works is that we got the first part of that, the scenario correct. So if you're renting the ice, you can park your vehicle there. However, if you are doing things like, your RV is being parked there overnight and you're hosting, let's say, for example, a farmer's market or an event that takes up the parking lot, that is a chargeable space. So if you're using that parking lot as a chargeable space, so you're using it as an RV place, like, multiple RVs, you're having a farmer's market on there, you're hosting an event that actually takes up the parking lot, that is a rentable space, as a separate space.
So if the RV is there because they're hosting inside the BRAC chemical.
So what we would so basically the way they would look at that, Your Worship, is that if there's one RV and they're a part of that, event or whatever, we wouldn't charge that. If it's multiple RVs and they're going to be there to be part of that event and they don't want to be at the Jerry Petula RV park, we would charge that as a rentable space.
Okay.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just going down a little bit different of an avenue here. I'd like to talk about the fees and charges related to lane rentals in the swimming pool. We had a presentation from the local swim team here at Committee of the Whole back on October 13th, and as one of the pieces they outlined at the end was the lane rates per hour and how our lane rates per hour in Beaumont differed to Edmonton nonprofit, Leduc non-peak, Leduc peak, and Strathcona County. Since then, administration has brought back the non-peak rate of $11.55 per lane per hour for Beaumont, which is, I think it's good to have the option of the peak and non-peak. What I would like to suggest is looking at Leduc's rates for lane per hour for peak and non-peak. So when the Beaumont Sports and Recreation Center is closed for construction, the swim team will be looking to other facilities to backstop that around, and likely, I don't know, but I would suspect that they would look for more space in Leduc. So currently, just a little bit of math, page out of Councillor Stout's book here, see if I can do it well. Beaumont's peak is $16.50 an hour, Leduc's peak is $14.10 an hour, where Beaumont is $2.40 per lane per hour more than Leduc still. That didn't change. We did add the non-peak of $11.55 per hour. The non-peak in Leduc is $9.87 per hour for a difference of $1.68 per lane per hour difference. I propose, or I would motion that we move Beaumont's lane charges to match Leduc's lane charges.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor.
Through Your Worship, if I can just double check, I didn't write this down. So you're saying the Leduc peak is what? 12?
So from the presentation, the Leduc peak was 14.1.
And then you were indicating ours is 12 or 16?
16.50.
Okay.
Is our normal.
And then the non-peak?
So our new non-peak is 11.50 or 11.55.
Yep.
And then the Leduc non-peak from the presentation was 9.87. So when the swim team leaves Beaumont, because we're constructing a great facility that I can't wait for them to come back to, I would, a couple of things we heard from the swim team is that they were having some financial issues, and they've really bared down this year to look at those financial issues and get them all sorted out. There was a tough decision that they made earlier in the year around their the commitment they were going to be able to make to their ultra-competitive team, and they made a tough decision there. I would not want to be part of the council that didn't have our swim team returning to Beaumont because of rather large discrepancies in the fees that we charge. So, $2.40 per lane per hour when they're renting multiple lanes adds up when they're a large renter of the facility. So that's the basis for my motion.
Yeah, and Councillor Van Newkirk has now motioned to amend my motion. Or
It's about, you come back at second reading with that change.
Yes, if that's...
Well,
We don't have to vote on it, come back at second.
The recommendation would be that there is first reading. You can amend first reading if you want, or you can make a recommendation to advise to make the adjustments at second reading.
Well, just to keep it clear, I think we meant, if we're going to do it, council's got to support the amendment, so we got to vote on the amendment to support first reading. The bylaw, it'll turn into the bylaws amended. So if council doesn't support Councillor Van Newkirk's motion to match the Duke, then the fee stay is the fee stay. Yeah, so. Mr. Hills.
Thank you, Worship. One of the things that I would ask is that the motion read that we match Ledukes. I wouldn't want to put a number because we would have to confirm those lane rental rates.
Fair enough.
Fair. And through your worship, if I may, just in quick calculations based on what they have paid in lane rentals, looking at about $4,800 to $5,000 reduction in revenue.
Okay. Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Worship. I want to clear up a process that Councillor Hendricks has moved this motion as it sits right now, so I just want to confirm that he is okay with amending the motion as it sits on the floor.
Councillor Hendricks?
Actually, that's why I hit the button. I'd be happy to have a friendly amendment to my motion. I'd accept that.
And the rest, okay.
Process, and as an information item, if we're checking out Leduc, I'd like to see if Leduc Rec Center also has a parking lot charge. Just want to make sure that we're consistent with that, and for that, we're finding also, just not as an editorial, but I'd also like to hear back from admin at some point what the requirements are now for these user groups to use the facility. I'm hearing about insurance issues and other things that are starting to drive people away. I'd like to know what all our new pieces are for that. So thank you.
Okay, that's another issue, but yeah.
Through your worship, in regards to insurance, that is a requirement for any user group to provide insurance. It's a risk management issue.
Yeah.
Should something happen, they can purchase insurance from CanSport if they can't. They don't have it on a regular basis, so there's avenues for them, but it's a risk management issue. Should somebody get injured with one of those events, then the town is responsible for those costs. And the requirement has, since I've been here, the requirement is that any user group should be providing that insurance. If they haven't, they've been fortunate, but that's what our insurers require.
Yeah,
that's
no worries.
Your Worship, that's not really the issue. I think it's the valuation.
Yeah.
I think it's doubled over year, so that's just a question. So,
yeah, the insurance issue, we could bring that up again. It's outside the scope of fees and charges, so don't lose track of that one.
Thank you.
But if council okay with a friendly amendment, then we'll just move on. It's a 5K swing. All right. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Harris, on the RFD, on the first page, I'm looking at the analysis rationale and going down the chart there. It says Schedule 7 childcare program fees increased by 2%. Mm-hmm. I thought at the budget workshop we had agreed that the childcare fees would not go up in 2019. Am I misinterpreting what that means, or am I on mark?
Through your worship, my understanding was that they would not go up to meet the 90%. They would continue as they have been. It's anticipated the 2%. It was already factored into that calculation that was presented to council. There is and so in regards to not wanting to go to the 90% cost recovery, which would have meant that the fees were increased. So if council does not want to increase the fees, there will be an impact to the budget, and we'll have to adjust it accordingly. And there will be a revised number coming forward when the budget's presented next time.
Because if I remember that conversation correctly, it was to apply the same 2% that we applied to all the fees. Not excuse them, but not the 90, not the 95.
Okay. My memory, my old age escapes me a month after the workshop. You're probably correct. I guess I don't have it in front of me here, but the publication, the newspaper that we put in there, I thought it said we had frozen childcare fees. Sorry, no increase in childcare fees for 2019 is what we had published in the paper. And so I'm wondering if there could be miscommunication there. Maybe your interpretation of our discussion is correct, Mayor Stewart, but I'm wondering, I was of the impression, seeing that in the paper, perhaps erroneously at the workshop, I know we weren't going to increase the cost recovery. I understand that, but I also thought we had discussed not increasing childcare fees at all to give parents some, how I put it exactly, less volatility in the coming year because we're still discussing the future of daycare in Beaumont. So I was under the impression there was no fee increase at all, not including the 2%, which is what I thought the paper said when we said no increase in childcare fees. If I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected, but please let me know if I am wrong, because I think we communicated it incorrectly, possibly in the paper.
Steve's got it right there.
Steve?
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, through your worship, I'll just share it was number 9 in the paper. It says maintaining the current cost recovery for town-operated childcare sites while childcare review phase 2 is being conducted. That's the wording that was in the advertisement.
So that's the 80-20 and the 2% case I didn't.
Then that's perfect then. So if council's of this impression that we're increasing by 2%, then my comment is not relevant, and I'm happy to withdraw it. Thank you.
Councillor Mark-Swain.
Thank you, Worship. Seeking a potential friendly amendment from my friendly councillor over here. So interesting, and I hadn't shared this with Steve, so not to compare everything to the LRC, but the next one I want to talk about involves them. Part of their 2019 budget deliberations, they went through a significant study about seniors' facility access. And I'd encourage you all, and I'll share this with you, Mr. Harris, about some of obviously the benefits of encouraging seniors to participate in organised activities, particularly using the pool. They've got a multi-page study here that talks about the benefits of that, and I'd like us to consider coming back in second reading. What they ended up moving was essentially a free access for seniors between 12 and 4, using, obviously, that's a off-peak time, and all the associated health benefits that are with that, as well as, directly lines up to a lot of our goals that we talked about in our strategic plan. I won't get into the details here. I'm happy to share it with council, but they have a very comprehensive report on the benefits of that, and I think it'll be something that we could potentially consider is to offer that up. I don't know what that means to existing memberships and fees and that sort of stuff, and the impact to the budget. So I'd appreciate if my council colleague would accept that. We could get that information back for second reading, and like I mentioned, I'd be happy to share the budget, share the document report that Leduc went through and did that, and it's very interesting reading.
Okay, so that's not putting an amendment to the fees and charges bylaw. That's an information piece, and I think it's great, and if we can get it back, but I don't think it amends this bylaw at this point.
I just wanted to say friendly because I like when he says it.
So friendly. Okay. Councillor Hendricks.
One question then, because we went through this discussion and we had seniors and we had super seniors. Is this the super senior discussion, or is this the senior discussion?
The report addresses all the questions about.
So let's get some information back.
So because super seniors currently are free, right, as far as the pool goes. So just want to make sure that I'm not a super senior yet, but apparently I'm pretty close to being a senior.
Okay, can we get some information on that back and what the cost impact would be for second reading?
Denied.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? Because I had one little point. Quick friendly minute, Schedule 5, page 333 of 399. We have 2/3 of the way down the page. Occupying a building or space prior to passing a final inspection, $750 a day of occupancy. And the one right below it, occupying a building prior to acceptance of all final documentation by a safety codes officer at the discretion of the GM, $750 a day of occupancy. I'd just like to add the phrase at the discretion of the GM to the occupying a building or space above prior to passing a final inspection, because we got into trouble with this, and this is how we decided we were going to alleviate it. Can I get that friendly amendment? Is council okay with that? Yeah. Yes, you are. Council okay? All right, seeing no further discussion on the motion, all in favor of first reading? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you for bearing with us. Come to the point in our agenda tonight for councillor inquiries and reports. Start with councillor reports. Does anybody have anything they wish to speak about? Councillor Monkoff Swain.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if Ms. Winter could pull up the map that I wanted to speak to. Thank you. So just more of an informational item for council. So Councillor Daniluk and I sit on the Capital Region Southwest Water Commission. We've had recently had several in-camera discussions about the long-term plan for water supply in our area. And we've recently come out of camera, so I wanted to share some of the public discussions so that council is aware. So we're well aware of the increased populations in this part of the area, and subsequently the water infrastructure needs to be updated. So as I mentioned on Thursday, we had the first public discussion about this. I'm just going to take 2 seconds and grab the laser pointer here. So again, just for informational purposes, but the Water Commission has entered into negotiations with EPCOR on a couple of scenarios that was looked at. So for those who are following along, it might be easier if I point here. Sorry, Mayor. You want me to go this side?
You point to that side.
Okay.
Everybody's facing that way.
So,
and I can see.
Most people are aware that this is our water line that comes in here. And part of the previous plan, of the master plan of the Water Commission, was the need to potentially twin that line to add to the supply of Beaumont, and obviously the new boundaries that come within Beaumont. One of the proposals that has been discussed is actually providing a secondary option coming from the city of Edmonton, coming down kind of 50th Street and ending up with in the new reservoir in our kind of Elan area. In that north section. So there's information that obviously administration are aware of that have been part of this process, but I wanted to share with council as soon as we get the documentation. We'll share it. The minutes are just being finalized, but the map will now be public, showing the different options. It was the preferred option of the Water Commission to provide that secondary option into Beaumont, and negate the need to have to twin this. Obviously, you get the added benefit of the redundancy there as well. So this is all part of negotiations with EPCOR. Part of that discussion talks about from this boundary station down to here as a long Highway 2 corridor. And obviously part of the land negotiations and the annexation that they did with the county, they would be looking at potentially selling those assets to EPCOR, and then the Water Commission would then basically carry on the assets into Beaumont as well as out here all the way down to Hay Lakes through Camrose County. So again, just wanted to provide awareness for council that this has been a discussion, and Councillor Daniluk, feel free to add anything, but essentially it would be looking at tapping off EPCOR in their territory here and then running a line to a new reservoir. This is obviously further out down the road. I think it's 2035 as the number, but just wanted people to be aware that these plans are now public and ongoing, so everyone has that background information. So as soon as we get maps, we'll share them. I tried to pull them up today, but they weren't quite there, but the options are interesting, so I'll share them, and you take that from as you need. But if you want to add anything.
Questions for Councillor Monkoff Swain? No. Councillor Hendricks?
Just an interesting factoid about the system is that Beaumont can also be fed with that water line by gravity. Doesn't need the pump. We actually have an elevation change.
No way.
So
cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting given where we are and that we're on the quote, top of the hill. So yeah.
Councillor Barnhart, reports.
Thank you. And by way of a report from one of my committees, I just I want to bring this to council's attention, and maybe at a committee of the whole meeting. It's from the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Growth Plan. It was an excellent presentation at the RAMP meeting, which is the Regional Agricultural Master Plan, and I just thought it was a really good synopsis of the growth plan, and thought if maybe Sharon Shuya from the Capital Region Board, the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board, could do a presentation for council at sometime in the future, it would be really beneficial. I mean, we could pass the information around, but it helps to have someone in the room that actually can translate it and show the maps, etc. Not unlike what Councillor Monkoff-Swain has shown, it does help to understand the density and the growth plan and what's a given and what we've approved and what's not something that we can. We heard about this in the land use bylaw as well, and I think it would really add to that knowledge base. So I'd like to see if we could have someone come and do that presentation for us at a future date.
Fair enough.
Okay, if council wishes to have that, I can circulate it as well. I
think it'd be a good idea to circulate it, but we can probably have that.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile.
Too. I see 4. Has everybody got reports, or are we into inquiries?
I got to send one report.
Okay, Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
Okay, no love here. I'll stay green.
Sorry, I fired up Councillor Van Newkirk. Hang on.
I just wanted to say that my extremely brief presentation here. Part of what Councillor Danilak and I did ask the Commission to come and provide a better overview than what I just did in 3 minutes. So you will be looking to get that from the Water Commission, a more detailed overview, so that you can ask questions of, to your point, the experts and not Bill or I. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
You got a report? Brief, yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick verbal report here. 2 committee meetings that I attended this month. Alberta Capital Region Wastewater Commission. The highlights for that are budget review for the upcoming year. Lots of numbers, not much to report there. Second meeting was the Edmonton Region Waste Advisory Committee, which is newly renamed from the Capital Region Waste Minimization Committee. One piece that was an important one thing that's been an important piece of conversation around that table has been the whole idea of extended producer responsibility, EPR, and the lack of it in Alberta, being the only place in Canada to not have. So one of the reporting out pieces from that meeting was elected officials agreed that we would bring back to council, the desire for or the ask for council members to lobby ministers and others at every opportunity to put some pressure on for the extended producer responsibility. At the AUMA, there was conversation brought up by the chair of the board, followed up by Mayor Nenshi from Calgary, and it's been identified that in government there are some hurdles to overcome around getting greater support for this. So if this council would support, the idea of extended producer responsibility being a piece of required legislation in Alberta and lobby as such, that would be great.
Okay, take that under advisement and see what we need to do to move that agenda item forward. Inquiries? Are we done reports? Councillor Danilak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm now serving on the CCBCC committee as a council member. I'm joined by Councillor Stout, and as an alternate capacity. We had a meeting yesterday. You may recall the advisory committee came to the committee of the whole a couple months ago about changing the terms of reference on how the committee is actually functioning and looking at going into a board of directors style of governance. We had a meeting yesterday and we went through a new term of reference document. It's being reworked as we speak and hopefully be coming to council to committee of the whole in the near future to consider a change in the governance model of the CCBCC. And I did request Councillor Stout to attend yesterday. I respect his opinion on such matters of governance, and he came as well and offered his input as well too. So you'll be expecting to hear back from this committee going forward and governing the CCBCC facility. Thank you.
Okay, I thought, any more reports before we try to move on to inquiries again? Okay, as a reminder, and I probably set the bad example, we need to start putting these in writing and getting them into the agenda. Okay, inquiries. Report. Councillor Hendricks.
An inquiry and a question then. It's regarding the quarterly report we just received. I don't know, is it appropriate if I ask a question regarding the quarterly report?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So the quarterly report regarding our quarterly discussions, and one of the items listed in there is the spray park storage facility. And in the action items, it speaks to evaluation and also a water treatment piece. I think the intent was just to have a throughput system whereby a line went to some storage and then carried on, so that at no point was there a stagnant system. It was strictly a storage facility that, if in the event that we had another situation where it's too warm, too hot, and we're burning up a lot of water, and we've got to go to a water advisory, that tank would then at least suffice for a week in terms of volume, and if need be, could be replenished by way of a water truck. That was the sum total of what I thought we were doing.
Mr. Hiltz?
Thank you, Your Worship, and the members of council. Under the old public health requirements, that may have been allowed. However, with the updated public health requires, any water that sits over 2 hours needs to be treated now in a public facility.
Okay, so if I can, I'll put my former Southwest Regional Water Commissioner's chair hat back on. So, and we carry regionally our own storage. We certainly don't burn through all of it, including what we use for fire suppression. That has to be maintained at all times. I realize we're turning the water over, but 2 hours seems to be a bit aggressive, given the volume of water that we contain within the community night over night.
The public health requirements are when we're using it for that public recreation, like for spray parks or swimming pools or paddling pools, etc. It's fairly explicit. For anything over 2 hours, it needs to be treated, and that's kind of the crust. But I know Morinville also, Morinville also ran into that issue as well when they were looking at it, and they're basically on the same system as we have right now.
Okay, so then a chlorine injection would be considered water treatment, or are we talking a full-blown water treatment plant?
We could do chlorine injection. However, you'd have to have someone there injecting it every basically every 30 minutes to 1 hour.
Okay, and we currently have a chlorine injection system within our own reservoirs?
That I would have to get information from the infrastructure on.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, inquiry, please. Thank you. Another conversation we had at the Edmonton Region Waste Advisory Committee in the roundtable was the answer to the question, what impact has the changing recycling markets had on waste collection in your municipality? And I don't believe that I have seen an update from our contractor or from our group on the impacts that we're facing as a world. There's been a wholesale change in what is accepted for recycling. Many municipalities reported back that their providers had provided educational pieces, stipulations, tours of facilities and such, and just looking to administration to get a little bit of an update on what we've heard from our contractor around how they're adjusting to the market, the way the market has changed and how that affects Beaumont.
CEO?
I'll check with infrastructure and find out what, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Just wanted to offer my thanks to whoever it was that organised the Global Traffic Group presentation at the last Committee of the Whole meeting. To Mr. Schwartz, if it was you, or please pass my thanks on to whoever it was if it wasn't you. I found that presentation, interesting. I did find that I couldn't really understand most of the data presented until I actually saw the presentation, which led me then to I had to reread it and re-understand it, which then led me to a whole bunch of questions that I couldn't ask in the meeting because I hadn't thought of them until afterwards. But I was going to request that we have them back for further questioning. But I noticed that they're already scheduled to make a presentation in, I think it says early 2019 in the minutes from that meeting. Do we have a clearer definition of when that will be?
Mr. Hiltz.
Through your worship and the council. What we're going to be doing with Global Traffic is we're going to hold a couple public meetings probably early in the new year. They've agreed to come back and do that more from a public perspective. What we're bringing back to council in January, February will be probably February right now, will be the global contract terms and conditions of moving forward. If we want to move forward with a new contract in June of 2019, the contract expires, and we're going to get that answer from council if they want to continue with photo radar.
Very well. So likely that will be February 2019 then, from what you just said.
For the report to council, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to CAO Schwartz. You may recall we had sent a letter of our desire to move to a city status to government back in the late spring after our spring vote. And I was under the impression from our MLA, who's also Minister of Government Affairs, Municipal Affairs, pardon me, that Cabinet will be looking at it in the fall with expectation of passing it in the fall sitting for January 1. How is the government coming on with approval for our city status, please?
CEO.
Thank you. Through Mayor Stewart to Councillor Daniluk. We actually communicated with the Minister's office today, and we're told that, as you know, Cabinet's in and they have a busy agenda. We were told that Minister Anderson has a number of time-sensitive items that need to get through Cabinet, and our request is one of them. So we're pretty confident that we're still targeting a January 1st. We should have that decision in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Montgomery. Final question of the night.
Final two questions tonight.
Final two questions tonight.
Just a follow-up on that. Part of our discussion was, given January 1st and then a celebration on that, and administration was going to look towards that. I appreciate we're almost at the end of November here. We also, not only the celebration, but there's conversations around, taking advantage of that and getting the mayor out there in front of every media outlet that we can find that wants to listen about Alberta's newest city and all that sort of thing. Where is that process in the works?
Yeah, there's a couple things that are going on. We'll have some communications ready for January 1, and the plan is to have a major celebration within our city in May, when the weather is more accustomed to that. Some of the ideas that we're throwing around is let's shut down Centreville and let's have something in the streets, but we'll certainly do something on January 1 as well, so that we have communications out there.
Okay, thank you. And then my actual inquiry. Just first, an acknowledgement of thank you to Mr. Hiltz and the team for the discussions around the temporary dog park. As obviously you held an open house and got some feedback online. Some of the good suggestions were, does it have to be one? Can it be 2, 3, that sort of thing? Just curious on timing around that, when a decision is likely.
Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Worship, and members of council, is that we will have the survey results and the decision made towards the end of this week, and then we'll be moving forward with constructing, I think, 1.5 of the sites, probably in early December. We have an extension of the existing dog park until mid-December, so that'll give us time to get the transition.
And just to be clear, you're not looking for a decision from you guys make that
It is administrative. It's basically It's an existing program in one of our parks.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. CAO's update. Well,
Just one very quick item and a reminder to everybody out there that the budget open houses, one will be occurring on Friday at the Community Center at the CCBCC from 5 till 7 p.m. and another will occur on Monday, and that will be at the Ken Nickel Recreation Center. That's all I had for tonight. Thank you.
thank you very much. Item 12A, correspondence. Councillor Daniluk.
Actually, Your Worship, if you don't mind, if I could interject on that point, I'd like to find out if we can, if councillors have a chance to firm up their plans to attend the open house for budget. I'm planning on attending Friday. I could attend Monday if necessary. I probably will go anyhow, but I want to make sure we have if as best we can, councillors will be able to attend those open houses. Can we maybe have each other email each other or let us know, not publicly now if we can, but maybe let us know who can make which days. We make sure we have at least some councillors there. I'm sure we all want to be there, but we have other obligations, so.
We'll take it up behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Item 12A, correspondence to Cole Mother D'Uville School, grade 6 students letters. Can I get a member of council to accept these as information, please? Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would be pleased. You're pointing over there.
Thank you. I think Ms. Binder wanted to speak. I think I stole her thunder.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a bit of confusion because it was on the consent agenda. So I just wanted to just confirm that we did need a motion for it because it wasn't spoken to on the consent.
Yeah.
And just as a follow-up, we are sending a follow-up correspondence, and we'll send out to council as well once we send that out to them.
Yeah, you answered the question as to why we pull it off, but Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the administration. I just wanted to point out that it was mentioned that the teacher who initiated, at least in one of the schools, asked for the town to respond, and any suggestions or comments from the town or from council. So I just thought it would be prudent for council to make sure if there are any particular comments that were made by the youngsters that we would mention those and give them some positive feedback or otherwise, but I'm sure it's positive. And I just want to mention there's a couple of them that I'm sure we have on the books around safety concerns and want to, applaud the children for bringing that forward, because I think those are things around the schools in particular, and I think the sidewalks that they address that I think are very well worth our attention.
Fair enough. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question arising from that. Do we sand the sidewalks already? Or is that...
I don't know what we do. I mean, I know we do clear them and do some other things.
We will sand in certain places. The front of schools is typically the school's responsibility. This particular sidewalk, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Harris.
Through your worship, if you go to your budget package under service levels, you'll see which sidewalks are sanded and which ones aren't.
Thank you.
There is information there.
Great. Thank you for the heads up on where to find that. Further discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, call the vote. That carries unanimously. Councillor Van Nugert. That carries unanimously. All right, are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, no in-camera items, we're adjourned.